Hello, business owners. My name is Brian Barquilla. I'm with buildmyreputation.com, and thank you very much for joining us. This video is specifically about business owners that are looking to exit their business. In other words, sell their business sometime in the next year or two. And as far as what I do for business, I work a lot with business owners and in particular business brokers. So I do understand this business well. I asked Tim Bellon with VR Business Brokers of Tampa Bay to join me just to have a quick conversation about what 2020 has started like. How does that impact exiting your business really within the next 18 months? And how much does it affect what the value of your business is and what the possibility is that you can actually exit? So welcome, Tim. How are you?
Great, Brian. Thanks for having me on. Hope you and your family are doing well. We're doing fine here in Tampa. Tired of the social distancing, but doing our part to try and keep everybody safe.
Yeah, likewise. You can probably tell in the background. I'm not in my office. I'm in my home now, which I'm not alone. There's lots of millions of Americans working out of the home nowadays.
Yeah. Yes.
But I wanted to start up the conversation. I mean, the first half of 2020 has been crazy. I mean, just totally unprecedented and really nearly impossible for any business owner to plan for it. So my question is, I'm curious on how those series of events have impacted the merger and acquisition activity, and what does the market look like from your perspective as we sit today?
Yeah. Good question. Up until about the first or second week of March, we were on our way to record business sales. It was going to be like the third or fourth quarter of record sales, and the numbers went down. But I think through first quarter they were still pretty close to the previous year's first quarters. But they definitely have taken a hit. And even the recent spike in COVID cases, at least in our offices, decreased the level of activity from buyers and both sellers. I think some folks are just, and maybe prudently, are just waiting to see what's going to happen over the next maybe few weeks or few months to see if things will get back under control. With that being said, though, it's still, we've seen that the businesses that, whatever your definition may be of essential businesses, those businesses that weren't impacted that much or maybe not at all by COVID, those types of businesses are, in some cases, are exceeding, their sales numbers are better in 2020 than they were 2019. And those types of businesses, we're still getting a lot of interest, than people, and you can show that the figures, and you can show something on paper to a prospective buyer or even lenders, when you're trying to get SBA lending, that the business is still doing as good or better. Those types of businesses haven't been impacted as greatly. And then the businesses that weren't doing so well, that are now really hurting during the COVID, those folks, they're going to have to make in some cases, a business decision. Do they stay open, or do they, maybe go out of business, or do they maybe sell for a lot lower price, maybe just to get out of their lease or something like that? Or do they have the wherewithal to hold on for, another 6 months or a year or something to get those figures back up to their pre-COVID figures, so they become a more viable option, or buyers take them more seriously?
Right. Interesting. Now, well, if we started 2020 like this, I mean, where's this going? I mean, how do you see the rest of 2020 unfolding?
That's another interesting one. For one thing, it goes back to the COVID. It's going to depend on the COVID. If we get over it and the businesses, the business owners can, maintain or get back to those figures, I think, as I think you and I have even talked before on phone calls or something, in a lot of ways, I think we're going to be able to explain away these COVID figures, as long as we get back to get back to 2019 figures, or get back to what's normal. It's going to also depend on the banks. Are the banks going to continue to, do SBA loans? If that still takes place, that's going to be very helpful. And then the other thing, even with all of this happening, if the COVID were to, if we get that back under control and banks are lending, from a risk perspective, there may be a lot of sellers and even some banks that are going to want the sellers to participate a little bit. And I really see a need for sellers to, really consider seller financing to some amount. So really, there's going to have to be a lot of flexibility from buyers, sellers, the bankers, the landlords. It's going to have to be a team approach to get some of these deals done. In some cases, they're just not getting it done.
Yeah, I can see that. I know on your website, you have an article about kind of the pros and cons of seller finance deals, and there's reasons for and against doing that. It's all kind of on a case by case basis, but I see what you're saying. So, the first quarter we were on a pretty good track. Second quarter completely fell apart for most businesses. So the question, that we're getting online, and I know it's coming into your offices, has it destroyed the value of my company? And I guess what you're saying is, no, we don't think so, because it's something that you can explain away, just like any other act of God, like a hurricane, for example, relating to where we are in Florida here. However, if this kind of, if our current situation, goes throughout 2020 into 2021, and we can't show that the business has rebounded, then it could affect the value. Is that right?
It surely could, yes. So business owners really need to start thinking about those types of things, and I would say, some of the things that they could maybe do to prepare themselves for this is that, we've asked all of the businesses that we have listed right now to provide us, at a minimum, monthly financial statements, profit and loss statements for 2020 and at least 2019, so we can show the banks and the prospective buyers, how that business is performing as compared to previous years, so we can see that uptick. And in some cases, we've actually asked businesses for 2020, they're providing us with weekly sales statements or sales figures. So we're able to show, that uptick, what was about March 17th, I think, or something, like when things, at least here in Florida, got kind of shut down. And that was in most cases, that was probably the low point for most businesses. And, those businesses that are getting back up to maybe 75, 80% of what they were before, there's probably, some good hope for those businesses.
Yeah, and since we're talking about that, I mean, if you're a business that's been impacted here, I mean, what can you do to preserve and maximize the value of your company today?
Well, I think, besides, the financials and stuff, of maybe doing some introspection in your business and yourself as an individual, take this time. If you have, obviously everyone's worried about their business and they're probably trying to do everything they can, but also maybe start doing some of the things that you've been putting off, like, is your website out of date? Maybe you can make a small investment to get a better website. What's your social media presence look like? What's the physical appearance of your business look like? Is it dirty and needs a coat of paint? And is there, is the shop floor all cluttered and looks terrible? Maybe, some simple things like that. And, maybe documenting policies and procedures in your business, job titles, job descriptions, all those things that are in your head that scare the heck out of a buyer when you leave, that, the goodwill of the business leaves with the seller. Maybe you can take advantage and, do some of those types of things that will help your business. It'll make it a less risky proposition, some of those things, when a buyer does come calling and ready to make an offer.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I think as business owners, we all know that we need to carve out some time to work on the business as opposed to in it. Of course, it's easier said than done, but maybe now they have the free time to do more on the business. And I know, from your perspective as a business broker that's marketing and selling businesses every day, I mean, if you have a business owner that has documentation and notebooks and 3-ring binders that are labeled operations manuals and HR handbooks and all of that, I mean, gosh, that's gold when it comes time to earning the confidence of a buyer, I'm sure.
Yes, it does go a long way. And unfortunately, it's not very common to see those types of things. So if you can do those types of things, because statistically, a lot of buyers are going to look at a lot of different businesses before they ever pull the trigger, and somewhere in that search, and all of a sudden they come to yours, and they've seen 10 other businesses where everything is in the seller's head, and all of a sudden you're the guy or gal that has something, a lot of these things written down or documented that's going to give that prospective buyer a lot more confidence. It'll be less risky to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I guess that's what it's all about, right? The mitigation of risk, and the business goes beyond one individual person.
Well, and then with that risk, maybe it lessens the need maybe their need to ask you to hold a seller note if they feel more comfortable, or maybe a smaller seller note, or
Sure.
some other, or different types of terms that may have to come in effect with this COVID crisis going on right now.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you about too is the topic of about buyer finance. So, by now, most people have heard of PPP, the Payment Protection Program that the SBA, the federal government, came out with, along with the Economic Impact Disaster Loan. Yeah, I think I have that right. The
EIDL.
Right, the acronym. But what a lot of people don't know is the SBA is also really sweetened the pot as it relates to buyers of businesses too, and those are lesser known programs. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, as part of the CARES Act or CARES provision, they've carved out something where if a buyer were to close on a deal with an SBA loan before the 27th of September, the first 6 months of principal and interest payments are paid by the SBA, and the fees are waived for that loan as well. So it could be a pretty significant, chunk of money. And if there's buyers out that are thinking about it, you still want to do your due diligence and everything. But if you're on the cusp of making a decision to do something, it really might be worthwhile pulling that trigger to try and take advantage of that.
Yeah, and that's really amazing, because that's 6 months. That's not just principal and interest deferred. I mean, it's
paid by the SBA.
I mean, think about if you were to buy a business, inevitably you're going to go through a learning curve, right? But how wonderful would it be to not have that that loan to service for 6 months while you go through that learning curve and actually start turning cash?
Yeah, and then actually having the ability, instead of making those payments, to bank that money or use it for something in the business. Maybe some of those ideas you've had in the back of your mind, how to improve a business, that you can maybe start implementing some of those things a little bit earlier, or not having to take a line of credit or something to do it, or dip into your own savings. Take that money you're going to pay, that the business is then in the case the business is making those payments of principal and interest. So the business is, instead of making payments on that money that the business is providing you, you can invest it back in the business.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an amazing. Have you seen terms like that before by the SBA?
I have not. I've been doing this since 2012. I do believe there have been some things, somewhat similar to that earlier, but I have never seen myself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really historic. Now, I know we've talked before about knowing the worth of your company, and really, if somebody is interested in selling their business, among the first steps is to really get a broker opinion of value. And I know you do that for clients all the time, Tim. But even if you're not thinking about selling this year, for example, why is it important for somebody to know the value of their company at all times?
Well, at least in my thought, there's a couple of reasons. The first and foremost is that you never know when you're going to get approached, maybe by a competitor, a private equity group, or maybe a financial or strategic buyer, an individual possibly that had, they've done some research, and all of a sudden you look like a promising acquisition to them, and all of a sudden one day you get a phone call or a knock on your door, "I'd like to buy your business." And as a matter of fact, we're dealing with that right now with a business owner that we've been in contact for some number of years, that this business owner has been putting it off, the sale of their business, and all of a sudden this happened to them a few months ago, where they were approached, and they actually brought us on board to help advise them through the deal and to do a broker's opinion of value, because they received a letter of intent that actually had a sales price on it, and that was their first concern. Is this a decent price? And we were able to help them confirm that it was a pretty good price. And then secondly is that a lot of business owners, I think intuitively they know this, but you as a business owner, you will exit your business someday, whether it's on your own terms, or unless less favorable terms. We call them the dreaded D's, divorce, death, disability, and a bunch of other things out there. One day you will be forced to, you will either leave it on your own or you will be forced to leave. And to know the value of your business periodically, we'd recommend you probably every year you should get an update. All of a sudden, before those things were to happen, if you know what your value is and you're able to do that, whatever exit planning is to you, in a lot of cases that business is the biggest asset you have, and you need to know the proceeds of that sale. Are they going to get you through the rest of your life or whatever your goals are? And if you don't know that, at least periodically, I would say probably yearly, it's going to be hard for you to decide. And all of a sudden, something's going to come up and it's going to make you go through and contact someone like me to sell your business. And it's going to make it a lot harder to sell your business because you're probably not going to have that much time. And if the number's not what you need it to be, and you can't adjust maybe your goals or what you need for your life, you haven't had a chance to go back and fix things. If they are fixable, try and get that number up. Gotcha. So it's very important that you should know what the value of your business is.
And how often are you suggesting somebody really get some type of formal or informal opinion?
I would say, in a perfect world, probably every year. Okay. It's a minimal. It's not that much of a cost. And I would probably say if a broker did it, if you got a broker or someone to do it for you, they, in our office, we would cut a deal. If you came back and just refreshened it every year, we've already done the work for every year, and just, add another column of a new year on, it would not be a significant cost.
Okay. That's it. And what's involved? I mean, what information do you need to form an opinion of value?
Usually it's at least 3 years of financial statements and tax returns, copy of a lease. If there would be real estate part of the deal, we need some real estate information, and then current year-to-date financials as well. And then we have a questionnaire to go through. And really what that gets to be is what we call the add backs or the adjustments. What are those expenses that aren't necessarily business related that may benefit you personally, or one-time extraordinary expenses, those types of things that help us calculate what we call seller's discretionary earnings, or EBITDA. Okay. Because businesses typically sell in multiples of those numbers, and that's what we have to calculate.
Okay. Well, lots of good information to digest there.
Yeah. And I hope this was of some use. I feel for business owners there right now. I just hope that they can stay the course, and don't be afraid to reach out to people like me or other advisors that are out there if you have any questions or need any assistance with anything. I've seen that people have been very helpful, even in my business or others that I've seen. So don't be afraid to reach out and try and get some assistance from people to get you through this time.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, you never want to go it alone. I mean, this is too complicated to navigate on your own. Somebody should have a qualified CPA, attorney, business broker. I mean, you got to watch all of your blind sides, don't you?
Yes. Yep. Definitely. And if you don't have those people, you're going to need them someday anyway.
That's very true. Well, you got a crystal ball. What's the second half of 2020 look like?
Well, that's a tough one. Obviously it's going to depend on, a lot of it's going to depend on COVID and the banks. And going back again, if you are really, determined that you're going to sell this year, also would be, the willingness to participate in the risk as being a seller in some amount of a seller note. If you really want to try and get it done this year in 2020. Yeah. And the great unknown is COVID. And if it's not in the crystal ball, just keep doing what you're doing to get your business as good as it can be for the next year, whenever the time comes where you feel comfortable that you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's probably more uncertainty to be had in 2020. Even if it was a normal year, you still have the uncertainty that always comes with an upcoming presidential election too, which always sets things.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even mention that. That's just a bunch of uncertainty right there.
It is. But overall, I mean, is it a good time to sell a business in 2020?
I think if you're going back to earlier, if you were what we deem, an essential business or a business that has not been impacted that much by the COVID, or you see your numbers coming back, I think 2020 still has promise. I mean, you may have to be willing to hold the course a little bit longer, because there are a lot of buyers out there that are looking for bargains, and they're offering bargain, offers. If you have the wherewithal that you can, hold out for 9 to 12 months or maybe longer, it's probably not a bad time to consider, to at least consider someone like me looking at your business to get a value, to give you that broker's opinion of value, so you can go consult with, your either family advisors or your professional advisors to see if that number will work. You have to think, at least in our office, from a timing perspective, that once we do a broker's opinion of value or get the information, that's probably a couple of weeks of work. And then when we list the business, we package it. For our marketing materials, we call it a confidential business review. Depending on the timeliness of the buyer's responses, that's probably another month of work potentially. And depending on how we're going to market it, if it's a bigger deal and we're going to go after private equity groups or, different types of entities, that may take a few weeks or so to, identify those targets that we're going to go after. So from listing to actually marketing, that could be a couple of months at time. So, if you were thinking about it even now, we might not really be ready to go to market for a month or two. So now all of a sudden we're in, August, September timeframe before we're even really ready to market the business. This is for a bigger deal. A little, $100,000 pizzeria or something doesn't take that much time, but it's still not, it's not days. That would still be weeks to a month before we're ready for even something like that in most cases.
Yeah, it's probably something people don't think about. It's not just, it's more than just putting a for sale sign in the front yard. I mean, you got to prepare here.
Yeah, when you consider that we do things confidentially and in consultation with the seller, and making sure that everything is ready to go. Heaven forbid if you go to market with a business and you don't have the the book or the package, the confidential business review, all those things are ready. You have to be, when you get those inquiries from a buyer, you have to be ready to present them with that information to help them make that decision.
Absolutely. Well, Tim, thank you very much. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, how would they reach you?
Well, they could call us by phone at 813-260-3127, or email address is tbellon@vrsouthshore.com, or our website is www.vrsouthshore.com.
Sounds like a plan. Hey, Tim, thank you very much for sharing some of your knowledge with us, and we'll see what the future holds, right?
Yeah, let's keep our fingers crossed.
Sounds like a plan. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us. Bye.
Take care. Thank you, Brian.